All right, so let's talk about some special types of bias, or let's put some vocabulary words to certain types of bias. So voluntary response bias. This is a sampling issue that may occur when individuals can choose on their own whether they participate in the sample. If the people that chose to respond differ with respect to the variable of interest from the people that chose not to respond, then you have voluntary response bias. If we put, like an internet survey up, or for our school, let's say they put up a survey and they were talking about, I don't know, the food, what are your opinions about the vegetarian option at the food, at our lunch hall? And then you can click on the link to reply to it or not. You can choose whether you're going to be a part of the sample. So if you click the link, then you're choosing to be a part of the sample, and if you don't click the link, then you're choosing not to be. So, what type of person might be more excited or more likely to reply to that? Perhaps, like a vegetarian type of person might be really excited to, like, oh man, this vegetarian meal is really important to me. I'm going to reply to it. All the vegetarian people are going to reply to it. And the people that are not vegetarian, I don't care about this, whatever. I just eat food. I don't care what it is. So your results might be skewed. No. Let's not say skewed. Yes, I understand what you're saying, skewed, off what they're supposed to be. But skewed is a numerical description of something like this. Let's use the right word for the right topic. The responses are going to be biased. The true opinions of the responses in the sample are going to likely be different from the opinions of the entire collective, the parameter of the population. Okay? Undercoverage. This is another sampling issue. This occurs when some members of the population cannot be chosen in a sample. This will result in bias if the individuals that are undercovered differ with respect to the variable of interest in the individuals that were chosen. So I think if we go right back to my original little thing here, this kind of highlighted that. This little mini example of surveying kids from our school and asking about their attendance. The 20 kids that are gone, that's undercoverage. These 20 people were not selected, were impossibly selected for the survey. Well, if their attendance is different than the attendance of the people that were at school, then my sample means are not going to be right. If the true average number of days that kids miss was, let's just say, 3.1, my sample means might tend to be lower on average than that 3.1. And there might be some that are above. Some of your samples might be above. I'm not saying every single one is going to be lower, but on average, it's going to be off. That's bias. Okay? And that could happen when you have undercoverage. Now, if you ask the question about what's your favorite color, do I have any reason to believe that the 20 people that are not in the GPAT, that are not at school on a given day, have different opinions upon what their favorite color is, or their height, or if a question, the undercoverage might not be that big of an issue, depending on what your question is, right? So there's a lot of nuance to these ideas. Non-response. This is a sampling issue as well. Non-response occurs when an individual chosen for the sample can't be contacted or refuses to participate. This will result in bias if the people that refuse to respond differ with respect to the variable of interest than people that choose to respond. So this is the thing that really makes you sad. You do everything in your power to get a good sample. You make sure you survey, your sampling frame includes everybody, and then you randomly pick people. And one of the people is, John Smith. You go to John Smith to survey him, and he's like, I don't want to participate. And you're like, well, but I selected you. You need to participate, otherwise, no, I'm not going to participate. So now, you've done everything right, but you got a problem. Does this happen? Some people believe that when Trump got elected, I don't know if you guys remember, but when Trump got elected, the polls headed the initial, well, yeah, he only got elected once. They thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win, right? All the pollsters were saying that Clinton's going to win and Trump's going to lose. They think perhaps that some of this might have happened because the people that supported Trump, well, it might have been one of these two reasons here. And I'm just telling you what I read and what may have happened. This may not be 100% factual, but they believe that either Trump supporters were kind of tired of everything, and I'm not going to reply to pollsters. So like Trump supporters may have been less likely to reply. Like people that were Hillary Clinton fans were like, yeah, I'd love to survey. I'd love to talk about how I like Hillary and yada, 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 yada. But people that were Trump fans were less likely to respond to these polls, okay? Other people think that perhaps there was some response bias in play. Response bias says it's a general term to cover all bias that result in people being influenced into not giving truthful responses. Not necessarily being influenced, but just if somebody doesn't give a truthful response, that's response bias. So some people also believe that the Trump supporters might have been a little bit, he was a little bit, he's a little different, right? So they might have maybe even been a little bit embarrassed or not wanting to verbalize that they're a Trump supporter because so many people had certain opinions of him, So they might have not given truthful responses, or who knows? Maybe they changed. The other thing is that they think that a lot of voters changed their mind at the last minute with some of that stuff going on with Clinton and the emails and things like that. So who knows? But these are all big issues. This response bias is not a sampling issue. Okay, this is where the police officer asks you, were you speeding? Or the teacher asks you, did you cheat on your homework? Or your parents ask you, did you lie about, have you ever lied to me? Stuff like that, where you're like, oh yeah, I have, but I'm not gonna answer it truthfully. Huh? Exam tip: if you're asked to describe how a study leads to bias, we expect two things. One, give a plausible reason why there was a problem with the design or the sample. Why is there an issue? And two, and most importantly, identify whether your estimate would be an underestimate or an overestimate of the parameter as a consequence. Two pieces. Notice one of them doesn't say give these fancy words. I know some of you guys just love throwing out those like, oh yeah, response bias, non-response, undercoverage. They don't care about if you use these fancy words. You don't need to use these words at all. You need to explain why it's happening, okay? In fact, some people will use the word and think the word is enough explanation for what's happening. No, it's not. You can throw out whatever fancy word you want. If you don't explain why it's happening, you're not going to get credit, okay? Don't forget the second component. Do Americans doubt the Holocaust occurred? I don't know if you ever heard of this, but this became kind of a thing back in, well, it's a long time ago now, 30 years ago. Wow, I'm getting old. Back in 1992, there was a Roper polling organization. They asked Americans this question. And if we were in class, I would actually ask you this question and have you close your eyes and try to answer it. Does it seem possible, or does it seem impossible to you, that the Nazi extermination of the Jews never happened? So, and then I got to make you answer with pressure. Like, answer right now. Possible or impossible? And what most people do is like, well, hold on a second. Just slow down. Could you read that thing to me like 3 more times so I can understand the question, right? Does it seem possible, or does it seem impossible to you that the Nazi extermination of the Jews never happened? See, even though I've done this question many times, I still have to slow down. Like, I believe the extermination of Jews happened. So do I answer possible or impossible? Does it seem possible that it never happened? No. So I have to guess impossible. Okay? So there's probably 2 things that happened here. One, some people, some people always, first of all, the question's got like a double negative and it's very confusing, right? So people were probably confused about the question and maybe believed that the extermination of Jews happened but didn't know how to answer it. Or every year, a couple kids will kind of talk about this, like they don't like the strength of this word impossible. They're kind of like, anything's possible, right? Do I believe the extermination of Jews happened? Yes. Do I believe that it's like there's some kind of 1 in a billion possibility that it was fabricated? You know, some people might answer it's possible because nothing is ever impossible. I think that's a little bit of a weird interpretation of it, but every year some kids say it, so perhaps some people answered it for that reason. Like, I believe it happened, but I also believe that there's a possibility that, whatever. Anyway, in the actual poll, 35% responded that it was possible that it never happened. So then newspapers and, everyone's saying 35% of Americans don't think the Holocaust occurred. On and on it goes, and then it gets global, and they're like, look at this, Americans don't even think the Holocaust. Over 1/3 of Americans, becomes this whole, media blitz about, well, I'm going to say how ignorant Americans are, but hopefully you guys all believe that the extermination of the Jews was a real thing and not something that was fabricated. But I guess if you don't believe in that, then I'm not trying to offend you. So, what was the problem? Question was confusing. People that believe the Holocaust occurred may answer possible because they were confused. Okay? So that's part 1. That's what everybody says. Don't forget part 2. Therefore, the sample proportion of 35% is likely an overestimate for the true percentage, the true population proportion of people that think the Holocaust didn't occur. Okay? So please get both parts. Why is there bias? And then how would that bias affect our statistic? Okay? And notice, nowhere in here did I say response bias. By the way, what kind of bias is this? This is response bias. Okay? People didn't intentionally give incorrect or untruthful responses, but they were confused by the wording of the question. Okay? So this response bias is a really big grab that talks about a lot of different types of problems. Okay? Anything that can cause a response that's not what was intended or not what was meant to be done, not the truth, is kind of goes into that response bias. Okay? All right, so some bad sampling techniques. I'm going to stop the video here.